And hello, one and all, and welcome to this video that I've wanted to get out there for a while now. It's been something that I've wanted to work on. Been very busy with school and whatnot, but I'm finally able to get around to this. This is going to be a review of Daniel Bryan's book, My Journey, My Improbable Journey to the Main Event of WrestleMania. Just finished reading the book last week. Overall, really enjoyed this book. If you have the chance, pick it up. It's an enjoyable read, but it's also a quick read. But you do learn a lot in this book. Bryan talks about, him growing up and talking about how it was very difficult. His parents were divorced. He always maintained a very close relationship with his dad, and at the end of the book, it was sad when he talked about finding out about the death of his father. He only found out 30 minutes before he had to go out on Raw, so I remember watching that, and you could tell he was really, really upset. But this book, if you're a fan of Daniel Bryan, definitely pick it up. And if you're not the biggest fan of him, but you would like to know more about him, definitely do so, because in this book, he talks about his entire career, from working on the independents to being trained by the legendary Shawn Michaels. He talks about when he went down to Texas, how it was a worthwhile experience. It's something that he always, he was always just really a huge fan of professional wrestling. He talks about how he was a huge fan of The Ultimate Warrior growing up, and, that was one of his favorites as a kid. But in the book, he talks about going down, like I said, to Texas, getting trained at Shawn Michaels Academy, really, learning the basics, and there were guys there that were, throwing up and puking out the window, and it was a very intense experience for a young Daniel Bryan, but he would eventually, as we all know, he further talks about how he would travel around the world, wrestle in England, in Japan, for Noah, eventually find his way to Ring of Honor, work many years there. He talks about all the injuries that he had dealt with up to that point, the multiple concussions that he has sustained, and how he had a detached retina in a match, and it was just, it's amazing to think about his journey, how he was able to make it all the way from the bottom, work his way up to literally the top of WWE with his championship win at WrestleMania 30. And then he talks about eventually how in 2009 he finally got the call from WWE. Well, originally this was interesting. I learned that, if you remember the Brian Kendrick, they were teasing of him debuting a tag team partner, and Brian possibly thought Kendrick put in a word that he would have liked Brian to have been his tag team partner. I believe this was in 2009. See, it was 2008 or 2009, and then eventually the Brian Kendrick got released, and that, from that time forward until he heard again from WWE, Bryan continued to wrestle for ROH. Bryan eventually talks about getting the call from John Laurinaitis, talks about meeting Vince McMahon, how their relationship was kind of uncomfortable from the start. Bryan, was a smaller guy. Vince didn't really, see what was that special about him. He thought he was lacking in the promo abilities, and Bryan even admitted he was uncomfortable on the mic initially, especially especially during his time on the before it was NXT that we all know and love. It was that NXT kind of a reality show where they would vote off. They would have rookies and pros. You know what I'm talking about if you've seen it. It was on the Sci-Fi Channel. But Bryan said that was really a tough experience because they would have him go out there and do all these stupid contests and stuff that really made no sense. Because they thought they were gonna get a good exposure on this television show NXT on Sci-Fi Network. And instead, they're kind of being made to look like fools. So Bryan talked about how eventually came up with the Nexus, as we all know, that epic Nexus attack on John Cena in June of 2010. And Bryan talks about the incident that resulted in his firing. If you remember, he choked Justin Roberts out with a necktie. And after the fact, he was told that you're not allowed to do that. but they were kind of given free rein. They weren't really told what they weren't allowed to do. So in a way, the communication during that situation was what led to that incident occurring. Bryan initially was told, okay, you shouldn't have done that. You know what you did wrong, and that'll be that. But eventually he got a call from Vince saying, I'm sorry I have to do this, but there's pressure on me, from sponsors and what have you, and I'm sorry I have to fire you. And Bryan said, he was like, really? I mean, I understand what I did wrong, and, he was not upset about being fired, put it that way. He realized that he could use whatever name recognition that he gained in WWE and take that, and he says he went right back to wrestling on the independent scene. This man just loves to wrestle. I mean, it's, as he says in the book, like, he would like to have a family. He does mention that. He talks about also his relationship that developed over time once he was rehired with WWE, how he met Brie, and they would eventually marry her to be his wife. It was a nice story. I'm glad they're happy, and eventually it looks like Bryan wants to have a family once he is officially retired from wrestling. So we will see where that goes. But then Bryan talks about, how the first time that he got that run with the World Heavyweight title, I believe it's because Mark Henry got injured, and then Bryan cashed in his Money in the Bank. And then he talked about his difficulties at multiple WrestleManias, the matches with Sheamus at 27, how they were told pretty much that at the last minute that your match wasn't going to be on the show, it was going to be moved to the pre-show, and then turned into a battle royale. So that was very disheartening for Bryan. Then I found it interesting, he said at WrestleMania 28, how him and Sheamus were initially led to believe that they were to have 20 minutes to work with, and then they were eventually told that it was going to be this 18-second, what it turned into at WrestleMania 28 between Bryan and Sheamus. He said that was also disheartening, but in a way, how it led to the birth of the Yes Movement. He also talks about his time teaming with Kane, how he said it was one of the most fun times. Team Hell No, really loved that team. I thought Bryan and Kane, were a great team together. Really funny moments with the Hug It Out stuff, and Dr. Shelby, who was apparently I believe he said he was a student or a teacher in theater. So that was interesting to learn. He said he really enjoyed teaming with Kane, and really helped bring out the character of Bryan. And then he said how the crowd would continue to get further and further behind him until eventually he talked about his match with Randy Orton on Raw when he had the big blow up after they had to stop the match due to fear of Bryan suffering a further injury. He went on into the back and blew up on Triple H. He said, "You motherfucker, I'm so pissed. Why would you?" Because Bryan never had the match stopped in his career, and he blew up on Triple H, and he was screaming in his face. Triple H was saying how we did this only to help you. We're only looking out for your health, and I actually have it right here. You need to calm down, responded Triple H, who had been communicating with the doctor over the headset and called for the match to be stopped. And Bryan said, "No, you need to calm the fuck down." And that was just interesting to see. I could just see Bryan and screaming in Triple H's face. That would just make for an interesting visual. A lot of good stories told here. It was very well written, and eventually it culminates with Bryan, talking about his lead up into the Royal Rumble 2014, how the fans hijacked the Royal Rumble. They wanted him to be in it, and how that eventually snowballed into, with CM Punk walking out, and just, they were worried the fans were going to crap on Orton versus Batista at WrestleMania 30, and how that really gave Bryan the opportunity. The circumstances just fell into place that allowed him to face Triple H in the opening match, and then get inserted into that triple threat at WrestleMania 30 and win the World Heavyweight title. So that's where it ended on a high note. He also talks about his marriage with Brie, and he has a nice little epilogue, talking about how it was difficult to lose his father, and it was definitely an emotional way to end the book. But overall, a very good book. Pick it up if you have the chance. I believe it's $26. You might find it cheaper on Amazon. Go to Barnes & Nobles. But I wanted to get this review out there. My Improbable Journey to the Main Event of WrestleMania. Very good book by Daniel Bryan. And the only way to end this video is by saying, yes, yes, yes. Thanks for watching. I will see you in my next video. Till then, have a great weekend, everybody, and peace.